the Chief Innovation Officer at RingCentral. I'm delighted to welcome you all to RingCentral Ventures webinar on building products in GenAI world. We have assembled a stellar panel of investors, entrepreneurs, and product leaders who can give us their insights on what it takes to build products in today's world, where generative AI has become the main topic of conversations, not only in Silicon Valley and the tech sphere, but all around us. Before we start, just a few housekeeping items. None of the discussions from this webinar should be construed as investment advice. This conversation is for discussion purposes only. And the audience is welcome to ask questions. There's a Q&A button that you can put where you can post your questions. We'll collect them and we'll allocate time at the end of our session to answer those questions. So with housekeeping items out of the way, I'd like to kick us off. This webinar is hosted by RingCentral Ventures, and RingCentral Ventures is a corporate arm of RingCentral. For those unfamiliar with RingCentral, we are a leading provider of AI-powered global enterprise cloud communications and collaboration solutions. Our products include voice, messaging, video meetings, events, and contact center. We're a public company with over $2 billion in revenue annually and over 4,000 customers globally. And for us, like for many of you on the call today, AI permeates every aspect of our product now. For example, our RingSense AI platform powers AI-enabled call and meeting summaries, transcription, and action items for all users. For sales professionals, specifically, RingSense for Sales enables every salesperson to engage in smarter communications with their customers and gives managers necessary visibility into every conversation and performance of their teams. At this time, I would like to briefly introduce the panelists, after which each one of the panelists will speak a little bit about themselves, and then we'll dive into the panel Q&A. First of all, we have Rob Taus. Rob is a partner at Radical Ventures, which is an AI-focused venture fund, and Rob was an early investor in Cohere. We also have Miriam Eric, co-founder and CEO of Titan ML, which is an early-stage startup building a platform for deploying large language models within enterprises. Also with us today is Dion Nicholas, co-founder and CEO of Forethought AI, which is a startup building an AI-first customer support platform. And finally, we have RingCentral's own Prashant Kude, who is the head of AI product development at RingCentral. Now I'd like to ask the panelists to take just a couple of minutes to talk about themselves. Rob, why don't we start with you?
Thanks, Kira. Really excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation. As Kira mentioned, I am a partner at Radical Ventures. I lead the firm's Bay Area office. Just a little bit more context on Radical. We're a venture capital firm focused entirely on AI. We have about $1 billion in total under management. The firm emerged out of the early deep learning research ecosystem. So we have close ties with a lot of the leading AI researchers and scientists that have helped create the deep learning and now generative AI movement over the past decade plus. Close relationships with people like Jeff Hinton and Fei-Fei Li, who are among the leading AI luminaries and who are partners with us in our firm. We're an early stage focused VC firm, so seed and Series A is our sweet spot. We also occasionally incubate companies and kind of get them started from the outset. And as Kira mentioned, one example of that we did was Cohere, which we helped create and get launched and continue to work closely with. So anyway, looking forward to the conversation. It's a great group of panelists.
Thanks, Rob. Miriam?
Hiya, I'm Miriam. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Titan ML. What we're working on Titan ML is we're making large language models significantly easier to deploy. So we were founded about 2 years ago in 2021, and we were really noticing that deep learning was phenomenal and enterprises wanted to adopt it. But they had a lot of issues getting from the prototype phase to production. And that's even worse with LLMs because the sheer scale of them, they are just enormous. So what we do is we take those large language models and make them significantly easier to deploy by compressing them, optimizing them for inference. So you can deploy them and interact with them just like you would inference OpenAI. So I said we were founded a couple of years ago, but we already have a number of partnerships with leading cloud providers and hardware providers, and work with a number of enterprises, especially in financial institutions, to help them make their large language model deployment significantly cheaper and easier. But I'm very excited to be here, and as Rob said, it's a very, very good group of panelists.
Thanks, Miriam. Dion?
Thanks for having me, Kira. Hello, everyone. I'm Dion Nicholas, CEO and co-founder of Forethought, and we are the generative AI suite for customer support. What we do is we are built on your proprietary data. So we integrate into businesses, help desks, or contact centers, pull in a lot of that data, and then use that to train models to solve customer problems, triage and route issues to agents, assist those agents through a Chrome extension, and ultimately discover insights. Prior to starting Forethought, I was an engineer, software engineer, and AI researcher. I've done research at institutions like the Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute and the University of Waterloo, and have built products and infrastructure at companies like Meta and Palantir. And at Forethought, we launched about 5 years ago, 2018. And since then, we've grown to working with some of the leading organizations in the world, from Marriott to Instacart and Asana. Excited to be here and always thinking about how generative AI can be applied to end user business problems.
Thanks, Dion. And Prashant?
Hi, my name is Prashant Kukre. I am the Vice President of Conversation Intelligence at RingCentral. With over 2.5 years of dedicated service to this remarkable organization, I had the privilege of steering RingCentral innovation in the realm of AI. As the torchbearer with the company for new AI-first products, my mission has been to revolutionize the way business communicate, collaborate, and engage with their customers. Prior to my tenure at RingCentral, I ventured into a dynamic world of AI, founded 2 AI startups, one in healthcare, the other one in voice AI domain. During this time, I explored cutting-edge AI technologies, built highly scalable, reliable, disruptive SaaS products. In this ever-evolving landscape of communication and AI, I'm dedicated to pushing the boundaries, and happy to be here, and I look forward to our panel discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Prashant. So before we jump into our conversation, I'd just like to set the stage and highlight a few things from Gartner, a leading research analyst firm, and CB Insights. What's interesting on the slide that we're looking at is what Gartner calls the famous hype cycle trajectory. And if you look at it, you see that generative AI is already at the height of the expectations. So we're at the peak of and expectations are inflated and expect to stay there for another 2 to 5 years. That's how these cycles run. So what it shows is that generative AI is having its moment in the spotlight. And for those of us in this industry, we see this every day. And we see enterprises be consumed by figuring out how to adopt AI. We see lots of dollars being poured into AI from investors, and we see a huge community of startups emerging, growing, and innovating. On the next slide, let's just dive into what composes the GenAI landscape. Not surprising is that at the top of this is the actual models, the foundation models, large language models that actually make it all possible. And we all know about OpenAI. We all know about the different models that are out there today. But what's surprising is that how quickly these models got adopted for use in applications such as virtual assistants. And now they're actually also at the top of this hype cycle and actually approaching disillusionment, which means that there's a lot of these applications out there. Some are maturing faster than others. And of course, early people in this industry like Dion can probably tell us a little bit more what's actually what's actually going on beyond what we see on the slide. And moving into a little bit of the quantitative data, not surprising that majority of the investments have gone into infrastructure. And this is not even totally speaking to all of the dollars put into the development of these models and whatever else it takes to run applications on top of generative AI foundation. We now just recently saw yesterday or the day before, Amazon invest $4 billion in Anthropic. Earlier this year, Microsoft put $10 billion into OpenAI. So this is accelerating. Dollars are being put in, innovation takes place, and of course that leads to development of applications. Not surprising that the next level here, the cross-industry generative applications or horizontal applications, is where dollars are being put in to create applications like virtual assistants, like search, and so on. And then the next layer is emerging industry-specific applications, which I suspect is going to continue to accelerate. We want to look at what makes up the landscape. Some of the names you'll recognize, some of the names are emerging. The leaders are going to emerge, I suspect, very quickly here, considering the rate of innovation. So it's a race that we're all in. And now let's dive into the actual discussion so that we can talk to the panelists. So Rob, why don't we start with you? How do you identify opportunities in this GenAI world? We talked a little bit how you discovered Cohere. Maybe tell the audience, please.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, there's so much activity, so much noise in the AI space today. I mean, the graph that you showed from the Gartner hype cycle, it illustrates how quickly generative AI has burst onto the scene, but it also suggests that given that it's at the peak of the hype cycle right now, how much noise and fervor and kind of mania there is around it, which can sometimes make it hard to cut through and find the actual really compelling, promising investment opportunities. I think, as we were discussing before the panel, I think for us, it always starts with and ends with the caliber of the people, the founding team. And this is true in any startup category, but certainly in AI, there is still today a very, very finite number of individuals who have the background and capabilities to build world-class cutting-edge AI systems, two of which are on the panel with us today, but there really aren't that many folks who have the capabilities and have been working in the field for years. And so I think we like to start by trying to find the very best folks to back. And so Cohere, as an example, when we met them, when we met the Cohere team in 2019, this was pre-ChatGPT, this was pre-GPT-3. GPT-2, I think maybe had just come out that summer. But it was a lot less clear how massive this category was going to be. But it was clear that something meaningful was happening around large language models. And Aiden, the CEO, was one of the co-authors of the Transformer paper, which kind of ushered in the whole generative AI era. And Nick Frost, his co-founder, was a protege of Jeff Hinton, who Jeff spoke really highly of. And it was just clear to us that this team was the right team to back and believe in. And we couldn't predict at that point exactly what the trajectory would look like, but there were founders that we really believed in. And then I guess the second thing I would say beyond the founding team is we really have an inclination toward backing deeply technical founders solving hard problems. I think it's really important for us when we make an investment to be backing teams tackling problems that are not easy to solve, that are not trivial for others to go and solve. And so you often hear these days the description of a company or a product as being a thin wrapper over a model, a thin wrapper over OpenAI, something like this. And we tend to avoid making investments in companies like those. I think there should be some specific reason why the founding team is able to solve the problem that they're going after. It should be the harder it is to solve, the better, because that means the larger moats will exist around them. and the more difficult it will be to replicate. So we spent a lot of time thinking about which market opportunities are massive, durable, differentiated, defensible, not going to be, there's not going to be a dozen carbon copies of the same company popping up next week. So those are some of the elements that we think about.
So hard problem to solve. So from entrepreneurs' perspective, Miriam, Dion, Prashant, you guys solve very difficult problems. Tell us how you actually got there. How did you decide what to pursue? Miriam, maybe you kick it off.
For sure. So my co-founders are both academics. They were doing their PhDs when we founded Titan ML. And we actually started, and I know this actually isn't the best way to start a company, but started technology first. So we started with a research interest in compression of deep learning models. Actually, back then it was computer vision models. And we were working some really interesting ways to compress them. And from that seed of how we got in the industry and got interested by this problem of efficient deep learning, we just followed where the market was and followed what our customers were telling us. So we started with compression of computer vision models, and then moved into compression of language models, and then now large language models. And the reason why was our customers were telling us, actually, we're not using computer vision, we're using BERTs, so we're using Robertas. And now we're at the stage where, we're using Falcons, we're using Llamas. And what we've always been interested in is we're taking this kind of initial kernel of, we think efficient deep learning, resource efficient deep learning is going to be incredibly important going forward. And built the company and built the product around where the market was telling us. And we think with efficient LLMs, we've hit upon a really, really nice spot, because LLMs are uniquely difficult to deploy. And we also have very strong belief that in the long term, businesses are going to be deploying dozens, if not hundreds of them in their enterprises. So that's kind of the journey for us. But I know a lot of other businesses start problem first, but ours is as a result of being started by academics.
Thanks. And Dion, you and I met, I think it was 2018. So
yep.
That's quite a journey to where you are today.
Yeah, thank you, Kira. And I think a lot of what Rob and Miriam said really resonates with me. I also think we started from a technology first. So I don't know if this is a pattern, a good or a bad one, but most startup lore says it's bad. But I'd been fascinated with natural language understanding for a very long time. It actually goes back to school for me, thinking about can AI help answer questions? And for me, it was like, help me study. So that was my first ever AI application I ever built, was something like that. But I've always been fascinated around the research problem of question answering. So leveraging AI to answer a factual question. And I thought that both in enterprises, for customers answering their questions, for search engines, that being able to build models that answer questions is going to be kind of a foundational layer. In so many ways, I guess ChatGPT and prompts are now the next evolution of that. But so when we started right around 2017, it wasn't because AI was hyped, so to speak. In fact, it was the opposite. People were like, why would you start an AI company? But focusing on that problem of, hey, question answering at scale is actually going to be very powerful. Then similar to Miriam, we focused on, we tried to avoid the natural research trap of just building things that were cool for coolness sake, and quickly started to pivot to focusing on where the markets and where the biggest problems were in enterprises and for real companies. And we found that customer support specifically has this property that Rob talked about, which is it's a hard problem to solve. So there's high technical risk, but there was low market risk. And I think that's also an interesting perspective for these kinds of research, where the barrier is how good the technology is. Chatbots have existed for decades, but they've all sucked because, the technology sucked. And so our thesis was, if we could build better technology than anyone else in the market, or really in the world, so to speak, the existing customers, this problem, this pain point was already being felt. And so it really truly was a technology solve rather than a market solve. And so that's where we wanted to point our energy, because we were better at solving technology problems than trying to figure out market problems. And so that was something that we thought a lot about.
So consistent, a tough technology problem to solve. And I know, Prashant, you solved pretty tough problems. We were fortunate to acquire your company at RingCentral. So give us a little bit of your thoughts on how you've now incorporated this into RingCentral, where you lead generative AI. So how do you actually work within a large company, having built a company from the ground up and been acquired?
Sure. So my startup was, the idea came from my first startup, which was primarily focused on healthcare, and we were solving a depression problem. Like, based on person's speech, you're able to identify whether the person is depressed or not. It seems like a very interesting problem, because a lot of those chronic conditions are like downstream to depression. So I started working on that problem, and it was quite back in the days. I'm talking about 2015, 2016. Everybody used to talk about AI, graphs, and so on and so forth, but there was little or very little discussion apart from the research side about the AI in voice or for audio. And this is where I felt like there is an opportunity. So when I started my second startup, it was primarily for application of AI on and specifically on the voice side of things. And we started looking around. It's like, okay, probably, all this transcription is there. So most likely the technology has gone really ahead, and we just have to build on top of it. And then we slowly realized there are much bigger problem that is not solved yet. And simple one is like a speaker diarization problem, like cocktail party problems. I mean, these are there are research papers around that, but the solutions or the models that were built that time, they were not really useful for the production application. So we got into that, and we slowly realized like we have an interesting problem. It's a common theme for anybody who is going to build any voice application. They would like to know who is speaking when, and this led us to the discovery of other problems. Like then we got into the summarization. It was quite accidental, just around the COVID time. We were like, oh, this summarization seems like a interesting problem. Like everybody wants it. You have this phone conversation and meetings and all that. People want to take notes, but what is the best way? And a compressed model that can give you the result, but at the same time, it's not cost you a lot. And that's where we built our first summarization model, which was doing much better than anything out there. And I'm talking about back in 2019, 2020. That's when RingCentral acquired us. After joining RingCentral, it was a quite exciting journey. We came from the startup world, everything has to be done yesterday. And then we realized like we have to now inject our AI into the mature product line. So there are processes around. We have to make sure that we don't disrupt any of the large customers. So initially we built this platform, and we picked up the use cases and then identified the segments that we're going to go after. So we started off with the video, injecting our AI in the video side of things. And recently we have launched RingSense, which is our conversational intelligence platform. And now we are injecting our AI in phone conversation, in the contact center space. But at the same time, the way I look at it is it's also a great opportunity to build new applications. And this is where we have also created launched an app in March of this year. This is primarily geared toward the revenue organization. So it's called RingSense for Sales. It gives you a lot of context about coaching the salespeople, deal intelligence, so on and so forth. So it has been a quite interesting journey, but with the same conversational intelligence platform we built in 2020, we are able to integrate that in RingCentral and now powering up a lot of these RingCentral products.
Thanks, Prashant. So we talked about how we build ourselves and how do we inject an AI into basically every aspect of our products. Now, for some of the audience out there, for the enterprise buyers out there, the big question is buy versus build. And we deal with it, given RingCentral is a larger company, but there are much larger organizations that have asked the same questions. So what is the answer, or how do you go about answering that? Dion and Miriam, you're selling to enterprises, so you're combating this every day. So maybe, Dion, Miriam, starting, was give us your perspective.
Mm-hmm. And I think Miriam and I are probably good to talk about this, because we probably land on different sides of the coin, so to speak. But yeah, I think there are going to be companies that have deep tech resources, right? And so, like, for example, we've found it really hard to sell to companies like Uber, right, who are tech companies, have the machine learning talent to build their own models. And so I think in those cases you often can and probably should at scale build your own models. But on our side, when we think about most of the businesses we sell to, right, like if you think about a Marriott or something like that, oftentimes they don't necessarily have the kind of technical resources. And if they did have the technical resources, they should be dedicating it to what I would call a problem that's core to their business model. Like if it helps them, book more room nights, so to speak, then they should absolutely be building out LLMs and generative AI. But what we're finding is at the ops level, right? So a lot of these businesses, you want to apply LLMs to your core business, but you also want to apply it to your back office, so to speak, right? Like your support, or your finance, or other things that aren't necessarily core to your business model, but very core to your margins and how efficiently you're running as a business. And so for those companies, I usually tell them you don't want to actually dedicate your precious engineering resources to solving those problems, but you do want to solve them. And that's where I think buying becomes really interesting, leveraging a best-in-class technology like a Forethought or others for kind of the Gen AI for the customer support world. And there's obviously many great tools out there for different parts of the stack. That's usually the pitch we give them, and I genuinely think that's true. We work with companies like Upwork and Instacart. Upwork has recently launched GenAI in their own product to help people write job descriptions, whereas they're also leveraging Forethought for their support and ops. So I think you can end up doing both, and it can be really powerful.
I actually almost entirely agree with Dion, considering I'm at the very different end of the stack. So we are a infrastructure company that helps ML teams build better and deploy better applications cheaper and faster. So I like it when people build. But Dion's exactly right, that it really depends on what your org is like. If you're an org that doesn't have any data science and doesn't have any ML engineers, obviously you should be buying. And it also depends on how core the AI you want to build is to your business. So if it is for booking rooms, as Dion said, then you should definitely be building. If it's something that is actually very repeatable and is actually very similar across businesses and across industries, you're probably going to be able to buy a better application than you would be able to build. There's like a couple things that I would consider, like how core is it? How bad is it if it goes down as well? Because if companies go bust, whereas you'll always have your team. What kind of org are you? Are you an org that builds? And I would also say that this conversation will change in the next 12 to 24 months as building becomes easier. So we're in a phase right now where building is actually incredibly difficult. The infrastructure is not there yet. The tools are still very nascent and early. And that's exactly where we hope to be in that 12 to 24 month stage. So we help businesses build better applications really easily.
And you sell to developers, your target market. So that's the toughest place to sell.
Yeah, we sell to ML engineering teams, but actually quite often the need for our product comes from the business side. So the need might be my model's too slow, or the need might be the unit economics don't really work, and then that gets passed on to the ML engineering teams who have to try and figure it out themselves. But yes, exactly.
The business drives direction. Not surprising. Rob, coming back to you and taking and looking at this whole landscape with an investor lens, this is a very fast changing market. From what areas are emerging? Like we looked at some stats. What are you looking for today? Like that we haven't seen yet?
Yeah, I think I would say both Radical as a firm and kind of the investment community more broadly has deployed a lot of capital to this point in kind of the model and infrastructure layers of the AI landscape. And one of the graphs that you showed, Tara, was actually pretty instructive. Like the the infrastructure layer, which I think probably includes the model layer, had many times more investment than the application layer in the data that you showed. And I think that follows kind of a general trend with new technology platforms that you need to initially invest in the infrastructure and the core capabilities and build that out. And that sort of enables the next wave of applications. And so we certainly at Radical are very bullish on companies building up the model layer, companies like Cohere and a handful of others. But my view is that there will be some massive winners at the infrastructure layer, but relatively few, and certainly some generational defining companies. But I think there's literally an infinity of possibilities at the application layer. And I think that's just starting to be explored. And long term, I think by far the most value in generative AI will happen at the application layer. At the end of the day, that's where the rubber really meets the road in terms of this technology changing people's lives and creating value and making a difference in the world. So I'm starting to spend more and more time at the application layer. That can mean sometimes it's companies that are building their own models that are purpose-built for their end applications. Sometimes it means companies building applications leveraging others' core models. But I think the really important question, again, is which of these end markets and end applications are really durable and defensible. And I think another interesting question we're starting to ask more and more is, there are kind of first order use cases that make the most sense logically in terms of applying generative AI, where, for instance, you add a chatbot to an existing platform or something like that. But I think there will also be a whole category of net new capabilities and applications that just couldn't have existed before large language models and the era of foundation models. And so we're trying to think from first principles more and more and kind of let entrepreneurs guide us in terms of what are some of those totally net new ideas and categories that just couldn't have existed before. So I think, a couple examples. One area that is, I think, very interesting and just a ton of change and opportunities happening there today is applications of foundation models in biology and kind of the intersection of computation and biology. And there's a lot about biology that makes it uniquely well suited to the application of AI. It's so data rich and pattern heavy. If you think about, for instance, a person's genome or a protein sequence or something, there are very clear latent patterns in there that are hard or impossible for a human to understand. But if you throw a massive model at it, you can deduce really interesting patterns and eventually build models that can design novel molecules that can have particular end purposes, whether it's like a therapeutic drug for humans or other sorts of use cases in industrial settings and so forth. So I think that's one really interesting area. A related area is in material science, kind of using foundation models. You can kind of think of it as like foundation models for chemistry or physics, where you can design new types of substances that have novel properties that let you do things like, create more productive agricultural yields or break down pollutants in the environment or, address climate change or clean water better and so forth. This ability that foundation models have to understand the way that systems work more deeply than humans ever could, I think is going to open up massive opportunities across a lot of different categories. And the couple that I mentioned, I think, are getting less attention today because they are problems in the real world that involve atoms and not just bits. So they're harder problems, but I think problems that will yield massive opportunity as well.
I think that's truly exciting. We're the people here who are the panelists, we're focused on mostly making employees, customers better experience and have a better application experience. In at least, like, speaking to RingCentral, we're thinking through how to change contact center behavior in a way that customers get their answers faster and better, and agents are trained faster and better, and so on. But the things that you've talked about, changing people's lives in a way that that affect how we get treatments, the air around us, materials around us. That's truly fascinating. So I think that's where changing people's lives is going to come to light. Really, my next question is targeted at like the base. This market is a busy market. There are hyperscalers who are building very quickly. They're building models. They're now getting into building applications. They're certainly evolving and competing with each other. But it's really hard to compete with hyperscaler given the amount of capital, given the distribution channels. So how do you do that? Really open to anyone who wants to answer.
I think you don't. I think the hyperscalers are playing a particular game, and that's completely fine. We are focused on something that they're not, and there are people within hyperscalers who are working on inference optimization, and that's completely fine. But what they're not focused on is providing a great experience for enterprise ML teams, and they're not concerned about usability in the way that we are. They are, for example, NVIDIA has teams working on this. They're focused on optimizing for NVIDIA, but we know a bunch of clients that work on, Intel CPUs. So, I think you have to play a slightly different game. And I think if you are building a business where you found yourself directly competing with a hyperscaler, then you're probably making a very big mistake, or you're a much braver person than I am. But I like to think of the hyperscalers as doing core foundational infrastructure work, and the real opportunity is between the cracks and on top. And that's the way that I personally think about it, because I get asked this question all the time, like, won't Microsoft just do it? And it's my least favorite question that I get, because actually we're playing a very different game.
Just to echo Miriam's point from an investor's perspective, I think I could not agree more. I think this question has existed for every startup that's ever existed in the world, which is like, why won't big company X just do it? Why won't Google just do it? There's a whole set of companies that were very successful enterprise software cloud businesses over the past decade, about which the question could have been asked and was asked, why won't AWS just do this? And the answer to Miriam's point is, it really just comes down to focus and obsession on a particular problem. And you have to be optimistic about startups. You have to believe that a really amazing A+ team that's super laser focused on a particular problem, a particular technology, and building the best possible solution for that one particular area is going to be able to outcompete a massive behemoth that maybe AWS has some product that's kind of similar, but they have hundreds of other products and they're not really super focused on that. So I think the fact that there are big companies in the space doesn't preclude the possibility for startups finding a particular wedge and building a massive business there and kind of existing alongside the hyperscalers, as Miriam said.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I think I like the point that Rob made earlier regarding the app layer, where we will see more startups coming in. I think what I have seen is a lot of these hyperscalers are primarily focusing on the foundation layer, and they're really making it beautiful, easy to use. It works, better accuracy, so on and so forth. But I think the opportunity for startups is more about thinking from a next, what is the next innovation? And to me, it is more about autonomous systems. We went through the trends mobile first, injecting AI first. Now let's think about how you make a product, whether it's a communication or anything, can be an autonomous system, and that will basically change how we even experience the product, how we even build the product, and that requires the core foundation that all these hyperscalers are building. But there is a huge demand of reinventing all the software that's probably built before 2023, and creating and focusing more on the autonomous system side of things, where AI is a first-class citizen. It is driving, whether it's a communication, it is driving your workflow, so on and so forth, and humans are basically reviewing and assisting AI in that process.
Thanks. And the lightning round. What surprised you the most was on this generative AI evolution so far?
Can anyone take this or?
Anyone?
All right.
Lightning round.
For me, it was how the UX actually was the big game changer, right? Because GPT-3, GPT 3.5 was around for like a year and a half before ChatGPT. And once they were able to, one, turn it into like a prompting system rather than just a completion system, and two, wrap it up in like a chatbot UI app interface, like I think it's actually a masterclass in how UX and distribution ended up changing the world. not even the AI, although the AI is really powerful too. But I think that was a big surprise for me.
That's a really good one, Dion. Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's amazing just how making a intuitive conversational interface just completely changed the game with these models. I guess one that I'll mention is it has been fascinating to see like how, and surprising how important at the end of the day the silicon layer is to everything. Like you kind of forget about it because it gets abstracted to the software and application layer. But today, like basically the limiting factor for progress in AI is access to GPUs. And like no company in the world can get their hands on enough GPUs to train as big of models as they want. And like TSMC can't create these things out fast enough. And NVIDIA has like a 24-month backlog. And it wasn't at all obvious a couple of years ago that the software and the data would become so powerful that the rate limiter would really become the hardware. So I think that's been an interesting learning and has implications for a ton of startup opportunities, like certainly including TitanML, where the creativity on the software side is necessary given some of the limitations on the hardware side.
Thanks for the plug. Mine is how quickly corporates are moving. I have never seen, like, even Microsoft, a hyperscaler, is moving and adapting and innovating so incredibly quickly. And I guess you should expect it from them. They're a tech company, but they've been very slow in the past. But even very traditional financial services companies here in Europe are moving incredibly quickly and trying to adopt very, very quickly. So that's incredibly exciting for the future of enterprise adoption of AI.
I will say everything about generative AI is fascinating. Like it's quite a surprise, even from accuracy, quality of the result, and it's gonna really it's really opening the doors for new startup ideas and for the enterprise to reinvent their entire stack.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything said. I think just the speed itself is a big surprise, and the pace of innovation across the, like, every industry that's participating, which is everybody. And I see it every day in what we do. I see it in our customers. I see it in the companies that we talk to, it's. And from the interest that is generating just at every level of organization or consumer, the pace of adoption. And we quickly all change, I think, going from Google it to ChatGPT it, or whichever choice of you choose for your OpenAI interface. Let's open this to the audience. There are a couple of questions that have come in. One of the questions is, what segment within the AI landscape is the most bullish in terms of ROI? And Rob, that's really a question for you in terms of you kind of answered part of it, where you see potential investments come in and evolve, but really, where's the fastest maybe ROI or the biggest ROI?
Yeah, I hate to answer with a non-answer, but I do think that the most accurate answer is there's not just one area. Like and we are firm believers at Radical that like every part of the technology stack is going to be transformed and upended by AI. So I think there are amazing, massively lucrative investment opportunities that will happen starting all the way at the silicon layer, like new kinds of chips for inference, for training, et cetera. Certainly at the model layer, you know, to date, many of the largest new AI companies have been at the model layer, whether that's OpenAI, Anthropic, et cetera. At the infrastructure and tooling layer, companies like LangChain that are sort of building the tooling to enable companies to actually operationalize and productionize language models in practical applications. And then at the application layer, again, where the rubber really meets the road. So I think if I had to kind of pick one of those broad categories, again, I think long-term, the most excitement, the most value, the most opportunity exists at the application layer. And it's also probably the least explored to this point. And in terms of which application areas within there are most interesting, again, I think there's going to be so much value created across the board in healthcare and finance and biology and transportation, et cetera. This is one of those unique situations where I really don't think it's possible to overstate how much transformation and opportunity there is. And so it really, I think more than anything comes down to, from an investor's point of view, kind of personal preferences and background knowledge, and from an entrepreneur's point of view, their particular passion, because I just think there's so many opportunities to create kind of generationally defining companies right now.
And so for the entrepreneurs in the room, the question from the audience is, if you weren't building what you're building now, what would you be building?
I guess I can take this. So I think I'm kind of a junkie when it comes to application layer AI. You know, I always got my start just thinking about, here's this amazing technology, and what is the biggest kind of user impacting product you can build out of it. And I just love to be at that intersection of like seeing the future and kind of building products, hence the name of the company, Forethought. And so if I wasn't doing this, I would probably be doing this, but in like other spaces. So thinking about what problem do I have, and what can AI solve for that? Like random things, like we have, you know, accounts receivable and accounts payable stuff at the company and like accounting, like how can AI go and fix that for me? So there's a whole bunch of that stuff. And then, but if I were to just do something radically different, I am like, I'm kind of a hobbyist when it comes to quantum physics. So unrelated to any of this stuff. But I am curious about where quantum computing comes into play in the next 20 years. And so I'd probably do some research on that.
This is an incredibly hard question, because I think as an entrepreneur, you have to just get obsessed with whatever you're working on. So it's very hard to think about alternative realities. I would definitely be in AI. I would also be in, I guess, like what Rob calls like a more defensible AI company. My background's in theoretical physics, so I like working on problems that are technically challenging. So the answer is probably I would be an early employee at a company like mine, which is not particularly interesting. But I'd do something completely different. There's another world in which I was doing a PhD right now, and there's another world in which I was a deep tech VC, which I think I would also enjoy, but I wouldn't be good at it because I would get too obsessed and attached to each individual company, which I don't think is healthy.
I couldn't agree more. Do what like when I was starting my company, I was exploring some ideas. I was talking to one of my investor friends, and the advice that I got is, do what you know how to do. Figure out how to solve this problem that you know exists, a real problem, in a better way, and that you're passionate about. Like look at all the companies that were created basically to solve Excel problems better. Whether it's Carta or Airtable or Monday, they're all just taking a problem that we all used to solve in Excel. Some still do. Just broadening this up a little bit, we're all US focused, and here right now, the world is huge, And the audience, the question from the audience is the rate of generative AI adoption as fast outside of the United States? What's your view?
Yeah, well, I'll take this as the only European here. Yes, the world does exist outside of the US, and yes, corporates exist outside of the US, and they act in fairly similar ways. So we work with both European and US partners. The key difference that I would say between them is in Europe, we're a lot more privacy and security conscious. So the question about self-hosting versus using API-based models like OpenAI has come a lot earlier for European investors, to the point where they're building their first GenAI applications through fine-tuning and deploying privately. Whereas in the US, what we've seen more is prototyping with OpenAI and then looking to migrate to self-hosting. So I think that's the major difference. But yes, I can promise you the hype is as intense here. Although I would mention that there is a lot less talk about AGI and the world being taken over by robots on this side of the Atlantic.
Anyone else? Prashant, you have developers all over the world. So what's your take?
Yeah, I think the usage of generative AI has increased significantly, not just at the enterprise level, even a common man is using it. And OpenAI has done a lot of favor to everybody, marketed the shit out of the product, and everybody now knows about it. So with that said, what I'm seeing is strong interest from large enterprise to invest in AI, and generative AI is a much easier way to see the results of it. But what I'm seeing is more investment in generative AI, but at the same time, trying to differentiate the products using generative AI plus the predictive side of things, and building a much differentiated product. So totally seeing the uptake in the enterprise space, but also new additions to that.
Thanks. Rob, question really for you, and this is from those fundraising right now, and like early stage fundraising. What can you tell them?
For early stage entrepreneurs, you mean?
Yeah, like what's the landscape like for really early startups right now?
Yeah, I mean it is funny, and the founders on this call can relate to this very intimately, but startup fundraising in 2023 feels very much like a dichotomy, like a tale of two cities. Like overall, there's certainly been a pullback in early stage fundraising, and the market has rationalized a lot after the crazy excesses of 2021, 2022, when there were very low interest rates and capital was sloshing around everywhere, and there's just a ton of capital is being deployed into startups. That has certainly slowed, and there has been a lot of pain in terms of companies having to do layoffs, doing down rounds, kind of resetting expectations from a valuation perspective. And all of that, I think, is healthy and necessary given some of the excesses of 2021. But at the same time, there's sort of a parallel universe in the world of AI, generative AI, where a lot of the dynamics that existed in 2021 are actually still at play. And there is kind of this irrational exuberance that's happening in the world of AI. So frankly, and I'm not saying it's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but it is just a reality that if you're building an AI startup in 2023, you will in general have a much more straightforward and easy path to fundraising than if you are building in a different category. And obviously that inevitably leads to some temptation to every startup kind of rebranding themselves as an AI startup to try to tap into that hype. But I think, I don't know, I guess advice I would have is like pick a specific problem that you're really obsessed with and focused on, and think about what kind of product and what kind of technology you need to marshal to actually solve that problem in a powerful way. And I think, try to avoid stretching to include generative AI just for the sake of including it. And on the flip side, if you are genuinely building, a phenomenal AI startup like Forethought or Titan ML, but you're at an earlier stage, like I would also say it's worth resisting the temptation to raise too much too soon at too high of a valuation, even though in some cases that will be a possibility, and given today's frothy environment, just because it can set companies up for failure down the road. And again, we're seeing that play out with all the companies from 2021 that raised at these crazy valuations that they couldn't grow into. So I think it's good to try to not get too swept away in that, and raise enough money that you need for the company, but don't drown your company in cash also.
So get enough money to get to MVP, minimal viable product.
Yep.
And go from there. Thanks. And our last question. There's a lot of paranoia out there. There's a lot of excitement. There's also a lot of paranoia. So is the concern that AI is taking over humanity overblown? We're obviously all believers here, but like, what are your thoughts? What should we be doing to manage that?
I think it depends what you mean by taking over humanity. If you mean that AI will be integral into every single thing that we do, every single business process, every interaction we have, then yes, absolutely. AI will be absolutely everywhere. I foresee businesses having hundreds of AI applications or LLM applications going forward. If you're talking this Terminator style situation, I mean, maybe. But loads of things can go wrong. I feel like I don't think I'm there yet. I also think a paper that came out 2 weeks ago about LLMs not really having a world model, that they're actually just very, very good at remembering, but aren't actually constructing an internal world model. And that was demonstrated by, if you asked it, for example, who is the mother of Tom Cruise, it could answer. But if you said, the son of so-and-so is who, and they couldn't answer Tom Cruise. So what I think it's showing us that these LLMs are very, very good fuzzy memory compression machines, but aren't creating this world model. So sure, we might create some sort of Terminator. Not convinced it's with this architecture. Not convinced it's right now. I think we'll get things that are very, very good at pattern recognition and are very, very good at sounding human and sounding incredibly intelligent. But it will take over, and that it will be absolutely everywhere. That's my take. Maybe it's a bit European.
I guess, yeah, my 2 cents. I mean, so I think AI will be the most profound positive impact on humanity in the decades ahead. I agree with Miriam, it'll be everywhere. I do think, though, maybe to have a bit guarded of a take, like I do think it also is going to usher in a lot of real adversity and pain and difficulty for humanity. Like there's going to be vast job loss. It just is a reality. A lot of the things that humans are paid to do today, AI is going to be able to do much more cheaply and effectively. So I think that's going to be a really big challenge that humanity has on its hands, and it's a challenge that governments will have to kind of step into, and think about reskilling and the social safety net and so forth. And I do think that there is a non-zero chance that really powerful AI could pose an existential threat to humanity, which I think is basically consistent with what Miriam said. I don't think you can rule it out entirely. I don't think it's necessarily likely, certainly not with this generation of models. No, there's a 0% chance GPT-4 is going to take over the world and kill everyone. But if we continue on this trajectory, it's not out of the question. And so even though I think it still is, relatively low likelihood, I do think it's rational that it's something that people are taking seriously and are researching, and probably would be better for there to be more resources devoted to it. Because I do think it's a genuine concern. And even if it's something short of complete existential wipeout of humanity, I think systems going awry can cause real harm and physical damage and all the rest for humans. So I think it is. I'm glad that it's become a more mainstream topic that people are thinking about.
And on that note, we're kind of almost out of time. So thank you all. And on behalf of RingCentral Ventures, I'd like to thank all the panelists for an engaging discussion. and audience for participation and the questions as well. And I hope to see you all in the near future in another webinar. Have a great day. Thank you so much. And on and forward was GenAI. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.